Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome into the 1011 streaming studio. Meteorologist Jessica Blum here alongside meteorologist Carmelo
So
Lattuca.
excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, we have to take a second here, I think, this afternoon to recognize that this is our first stream together, Carmelo. We go way back.
We do go way back.
We go back to college. We went to UNL together, had
Yes.
classes together, we had heart-to-hearts together, as you can imagine, going through
And now we're working
meteorology.
together
And now
and
we're
talking
working
about
together.
what we love talking about most, weather. Maybe not what we're about to talk about, but
Yeah.
weather in general.
We were talking a little bit before we started this today, and weather's not my favorite or winter weather, I should say. Weather is my favorite thing to talk about. It should be everybody's favorite thing to talk about in Nebraska, but
Yes.
winter is not my favorite thing to talk about.
And we're getting into that season. It's scary. I mean, it was just 70 plus on
Yeah.
Tuesday. And now we're talking
What,
about
a top 10, 11 day we
top 10,
called
11
it
day.
even?
And now we're talking about winter weather. It is Winter Weather Awareness Day. We just got to start preparing for it because before we know it, we're going to start seeing snow, we're going to start seeing frigid temperatures, and all the warnings and advisories that come with it.
Yeah, so we have a lot to talk about today to take you through, to gear you up for the winter season. As we know, we haven't seen the first flakes of the season fly just yet, but it may be a matter of time when we get into this time of the year before we can see snow, or at least the first flakes flying. So gearing you up for the winter season and what you can expect from us in the Severe Weather Center, just with terminology and, as Carmelo talked about, the alerts that we commonly talk about through the winter season, kind of the difference between precipitation types. A new one kind of within the last couple years or so it's gaining some popularity, a snow squall. We'll talk about a little bit of that here today. And then we'll go into kind of some of the cold alerts, kind of what your body can go through and what your pets should kind of know when caring for them throughout
Absolutely,
the winter
'cause
season.
when you're
So-
cold, they're cold.
Exactly.
And we are less
do
than
wanna
2
hammer that
weeks
home.
away from the first average snowfall in the city of Lincoln.
Ugh.
November 18th, and it's
Ugh.
November 6th today, so 12 days out.
A little less than 2
A
weeks.
little less than 2 weeks, yep.
All right, so we are going to get started here today talking about winter storm forecasting. We wanted to take you through a timeline, kind of what you can expect there at home and what we usually go through as meteorologists and what
Absolutely.
we're planning kind of farther out. Of course, what we're looking at farther out versus as we get closer to an event, of course, more confidence in a winter storm or a winter event happening. So you never really, bottom line, never want to trust a snowfall forecast more than 5 days away. And I know you've probably seen it too on social media,
Just
how
gonna
many
say it.
posts are just kind of flying around. A lot of people just throwing a model out there and saying this is going to happen.
And you don't want people to panic, and I get what people are doing in some sense that, beginning of December, they're worried about Christmas. Nobody wants to not worry about the Christmas plans. They want to have a good season, a good holiday like that. But when we're talking about beginning of the month and something that's going to happen at the end of the month, and you see an entire map and it's just purple and it's got snowfall totals over 2 feet, and you're like, watch out for the storm in 2 to 3 weeks, you just can't trust that, let alone a week. You don't want to trust anything more than 5 days out. There's a reason we really start to refine our totals. Usually at the max, it's 2 to 3 days out.
Mm-hmm.
And then even then, we start to change them a little bit more as we get closer to, because every hour by hour matters.
Mm-hmm.
But anything 5 days out or more, it's just not realistic because that's going to change.
So as we broaden the scope and talk about 6 to 7 days out, what you can usually expect is we're kind of recognizing patterns. We're looking at upper level patterns and kind of what may be swinging through, and maybe, that something may be possible, and that's kind of why you see in there, quote unquote, it's possible that we could be seeing something. But then when we move closer to, like Carmelo was talking about, 2 to 3, 1 to 2 days out, scenarios are emerging. We're noticing patterns now within each model run because there are short-term versus long-term models. We'll look at long-term models more for that pattern recognition, and then short-term models will add to the picture to give us a better kind of refined look at totals and kind of distances, because where, of course, a system is setting up and where
that
it tracks
can change
through.
hours before the actual event starts. And don't ever correlate the percentage chance of snow to the amount of snow that you could see. Just because we say there's a 70% chance, that could just be some flurries or maybe just some light snow. Doesn't mean it's going to be a blizzard. And if it's a low chance, that could end up going higher, and maybe the snowfall totals too.
which we'll get into more as we
Yes.
talk about some of these winter alerts. Those are important to know kind of what impacts you can be expecting and for how long. So we'll be going through some of that. So this is, again, just kind of a timeline of what you need to know when we are forecasting winter storms to impact Nebraska. Some other key points, here's about 5 that are going to pop up here in front of you that we just wanted to note here this afternoon too, because it's Winter Weather Awareness Day today. That's kind of why we're doing this. But snow and ice totals can vary a lot over short distances. That's kind of the first point we wanted to make. And as Carmelo and I were just kind of touching on a little bit, the track of a storm can vary within model runs. And we're, again, closely monitoring kind of the patterns, the shifts even between
Absolutely.
model runs. Kind of, can you talk a little bit more to that, Carmelo?
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, I've heard stories from the Severe Weather Center of a winter storm warning, and we'll get into that terminology about advisories and warnings in just a few moments. But where I've seen a warning where half of Lancaster County could expect up to a foot of snow. Northwestern side of Lancaster, for example, up to a foot. Southeastern side of the county, only up to an inch. That's how much we're talking about. Let alone the county, we could see differences in the city of Lincoln. One side of town gets a lot of snow. One side of town only gets a little bit of snow. So it's not hundreds of miles. It's not, 50 miles plus. It can really be down to that 10 to 20 mile mark where we see almost nothing to we're shoveling out for days. So
Yeah.
it's incredible.
Absolutely. So, yeah, you make a good point, too, in talking about those totals. It is up to you, the viewer, too, to let us know what you're seeing, because we like to get the full picture of what a storm has done to the area for those impacts, and we relay those to the National Weather Service. The National Weather Service, of course, great partnership with us to give us some more information, what they've heard and the reports they've seen. So we'll go into that, a little bit more of that here in a second. But we'll move on to winter weather alerts, and Carmelo, I'm going to let you take a little bit more of the lead here on some of these as we go through about 4 different tiers of winter storm alerts that you can see throughout this season.
So what we start off as with a winter weather advisory, that would be the lowest tier, at least on the 3 that we're seeing on the screen right now. So you could see some snow, you could see some frozen precipitation in the form of ice, some freezing rain, maybe even some sleet. It's going to cause an impact. We could see multiple inches of accumulation, and that's nothing to mess around with. That could still cause travel impacts on the roads for sure. That's going to cause impacts, on the way to school, on the way home from school. But that would be the lowest tier. It's not going to be widespread power outages. It's not going to be widespread, shutting down the city kind of event. But then we start to increase our significance in terms of our terminology. So winter storm watch, that's about 48. I've seen it as far as 72 hours out. When you start to see it 3 days out, that's when there's either a lot of concern or a lot of concern or maybe a low amount of confidence, but it could be high impact. Where is that going to set up? So that could mean multiple inches of snow. And I believe it's usually now 4 to 6 plus inches of snow for a winter storm watch. I do believe that. And I think it's in a certain amount of time as well. Once you get into that winter storm warning, that's in that 12 to 24 hour mark, maybe up to 36 hours, but usually within a day, maybe a day and a half, where we're thinking, okay, not only is it possible now, we think it's fairly likely in these areas that we are going to get either significant snow or significant frozen precipitation. And again, that could change by a county or two from advisory to warning.
And when you see a winter weather advisory, sometimes even on the bigger and more impactful winter storms, those can be kind of on the edge because we can see dry air enter a system, or we can see warmer temperatures on the edge of a system. So it can complicate the precipitation type that we can see within the same winter storm. So you can see some of these alerts within the same winter storm as it's kind of tracking across the United States. So we've started with there. We're going to move on to a blizzard warning too. So you've got the same 2 winter alerts we were just looking at on the left side of your screen, but now we've added the blizzard warning in there. And there are specific criteria you've got to meet to get a blizzard warning.
3 specific things. You need to have that reduced visibility, and we're talking about a quarter mile or even less. So you really have to hit that specific mark, and you'll be able to tell in certain instances at least when we hit that reduced visibility. You also have to have that wind component. You have to have gusts up to 35 miles per hour or greater, and they have to be sustained. That's the thing. You have to have the visibility component, the wind component, and the time component. You need both of those happening for 3 or more hours consecutively. There's times when these happen for an hour, maybe up to 2. You don't see a blizzard warning, and everyone's wondering, this looks like a blizzard outside. It very well might look like that, but you have to hit it for a certain amount of time.
So it can be, yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, a really bad winter storm, but if it's not meeting those specific criteria, they're not going to issue a blizzard warning. So in those instances, you've got to listen to your experts and your trusted severe weather center meteorologists to know the difference between the two and still listen to what impacts we're expecting, because it could still be similar impacts, but it's just not going to meet the criteria. And maybe we've heard from the National Weather Service that their reasoning behind maybe not issuing a blizzard warning or going full-blown blizzard warning. Because when you see the red, yeah, you can get a little scared, but it's just good to know that these impacts are headed your way. So now we're going to move on to the changes we've had within the last year. These are cold alerts. You may remember wind chill watches, wind chill warnings,
advisories,
and a wind chill advisory. But now we've turned to extreme cold watch, a cold advisory, and an extreme cold warning. Carmelo, if you want to take it away.
Absolutely. So cold advisory, once those wind chills get into that 20 to 29 degrees below zero range, that's when we'll issue that cold advisory. And again, it's, it could be issued maybe a few days out further than we would do winter weather advisories, because we usually have a higher degree of confidence when we come to temperatures versus is it going to rain, is it going to snow, how much of it. But once you start getting into that 30 plus, and when I mean 30 plus, 30 degrees below zero plus to 40 to 45 degrees, you start to get that cold watch. And then, the watch is usually a few days out, 3-4 days out. You get into that warning, okay, we're getting a little bit closer into the timing, fairly confident we're going to have these temperatures, and then all the impacts that come with it, frostbite and hypothermia, the top two.
So, of course, your watch is usually, we've got you watch whenever you hear it, it's just your heads up.
Yes.
Something may be coming, whether that be a winter storm or whether that be very extremely cold temperatures. So your extreme cold watch can be issued within the next 12 hours, if not within 48 hours from a cold event, which we haven't seen yet this season.
Not yet.
And hopefully we're not going to get anywhere close to that anytime soon. Maybe push it off to 2026.
Yeah, hopefully. One more thing I want to add is the timing component. Cold advisory, that 20 to 29 below zero, hypothermia, frostbite, that's usually within 30 minutes or so, to the uncovered parts of the body. But at the warning, that could happen within a few minutes. That's usually when we start to see the schools close, because, we're talking 5 minutes or less. That's not a lot of time at all.
You gotta think about the kids at the bus stop, maybe walking to school, hopefully not, but whatever. Yeah.
Any activities outside.
Exactly. Keeping all of that in mind. So we're going to move on to snow squalls. I wanted to quickly mention, too, we've already kind of breezed past blizzard warnings. We saw blizzards last year. If you remember the whiteout conditions in March that we had in Nebraska. Nebraska, of course, a state that we can see all of this. We've seen snow squalls, though, too, and that terminology seems to be fairly new, but we've seen those warnings a little bit more frequently.
The event itself is not new.
No,
just the terminology and how we warn for them,
Because how we warn for them now, if you don't know, the National Weather Service can send a WEA alert. It's called a wireless emergency alert, I think is what WEA, WEA, we will kind of talk about. But a WEA alert can be issued to your phone, and it's usually they can kind of draw a box. It depends on the time of the day. If it's a heavy commuted time frame, like an evening commute or a morning commute, they know a lot of people are on the road, and this is kind of coming through, they'll kind of issue that WEA alert, and you'll get it on your phone. And if you do see that come across your phone, you'll want to pull over.
It's the same type of alert that you would get if there was a tornado warning, winds are over 80 miles per hour, hail is up to 2 inches or higher. You just can't stop it. Your phone's just going to go crazy.
Yes.
And it's going to go crazy for a while, because we want you to be alert of these potential impacts.
So, yeah, a snow squall is a quick, intense burst of snow. It usually happens in and around a boundary or a cold front. It's limited in duration, but it can quickly drop the visibility, and it is usually accompanied by strong gusty winds, and that reduced visibility usually is down to nothing.
Absolutely.
Within a short amount of time.
Yes, and it just doesn't hit that timing component to be called a blizzard. It's essentially it's a short duration, very impactful.
Very isolated in location too sometimes. Yes. But suddenly the roads can become very slick behind an event like this too. So you'll lose the visibility, and all of a sudden there could be a coating of ice on the roads, things like that. So travel is usually not advised. When you can't see anything, they're trying to get the WEA out to you ahead of time so you know it's incoming for your area, and then you can pull over and kind of anticipate some of that. But they can come fairly quickly. So a snow squall warning now is usually in effect for 30 to 60 minutes. Yeah, very short amount of time, but like you said, with a tornado warning, severe thunderstorm warning, kind of similar in duration.
Similar in duration. And again, you're not going to be able to stop these alerts on your phone. We don't want you to stop them. They are very loud. They're very persistent. What happens with these things are very dangerous because you could be out and about and it's a clear day. Clouds start moving in, it starts to snow, and then you start to get this heavy impact burst of snow. That's going to make, essentially what you said, Jessica, travel almost impossible.
I remember getting the wheel alerts on our phones like a year or two ago, maybe last year, I think. And everyone was like, what is this? I've never seen this before. So I made sure to social all these definitions as soon as I could because people are like, is this a thing? But like you said, this has been a thing.
It has been a thing. It's just, as opposed to a winter storm warning that covers such a longer duration, we're trying to just what's the word? Trying to get it to a closer, timing. This is a shorter duration event. We're going to create a whole new terminology for it.
So now that we've talked about kind of the more serious winter weather alerts, we're going to talk about the different precipitation types that you can see in winter. Not all of them are fun. I'm going to pull up all of them. Carmelo, if you kind of want to talk about the difference between each one of these.
Well, I don't know if many people know this, but all precipitation, especially in the winter, starts off as snow.
I don't think
very
anyone realizes that. I love to throw that at a outing or a family event. I'm like, hey, did you know?
Yeah, this rain, it really didn't start off as rain.
Because in the summer we're never thinking about snow. We don't even want to talk about the four-letter S word, as I've heard Nebraskans call it. But yes,
but let's go through the different types. So of course we have rain. Again, it starts off as snow. You have that melting layer where temperatures are above freezing, really high up into the sky. So that's just going to come down as rain. No impacts. I mean, obviously rain can still have impacts, but in terms of the different winter types of precipitation, that's probably one of the least impactful. So then you go to freezing rain. This is a tricky one. It's one of my favorite ones. It's very difficult to forecast, but I think it's
very difficult.
It's a very interesting type of precipitation. So you have that cold layer aloft, so it starts off as snow. Freezing or the melting layer is still high up, so it turns into rain, but the surface is below freezing. So the rain,
shallow cold weather, shallow cold layer,
shallow
as
it gets.
Yes.
So the rain freezes on contact, which I think is super interesting, that we're having liquid precipitation all the way down just above the surface, hits the surface, and then it freezes on contact. And then you don't need much of that. We're talking a quarter of an inch of ice is going to cause.
Or even a couple,
a couple tenths of an inch, yes. But once you get to half an inch, that's when tree branches are down and power lines are down. So you never want to talk about more than that.
And then you've got sleet too, but that's when the warm air is kind of like cutting into what has been pretty much a pretty cold column of air. So there's a shallower warm layer basically as the snow is falling that it hits, it melts a little bit, but then it has time to refreeze on the way down and kind of ends up appearing in pellets.
Absolutely.
Sometimes some grapple, I think,
sometimes
can
some
form
grapple.
that way too. Grapple's kind of like Dippin' Dots if you think about it that way, if you hear grapple, but sleet is more of
You'll definitely hear sleet
ice pellet.
as opposed to freezing rain. You'll hear the sleet coming down. And, it makes me always think of like, this is what hail is in the winter. Just very, very small, not as impactful, but...
Thankfully not, 3-4 inches like we've seen in the severe weather season.
And then snow, cold air throughout. Always below freezing, so it's always that frozen precipitation.
Yeah, so below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, about like through the column of air as it's falling down to the surface.
Because I think people think, sometimes we only forecast in the 2D space.
No, we do
in the winter,
not.
It's in the 3D space, and it goes higher up as opposed to what's the temperature in Grand Island, for example, and in Lincoln. One says below 32, one says above, so it's got to be snow there and rain here. That doesn't mean anything.
We're looking at vertical air profiles and seeing is there dry air cutting in, what's the temperature. There's a lot to think about in winter season and a lot of wild cards, I'd like to say.
No doubt about it.
Throw a good wrench in your winter forecast. But I wanted to hammer home and kind of have a fun comparison.
You always want the visual.
Yeah.
This is a great example.
I love this. What's a good comparison to this in the winter for severe weather season is a taco with the watches and warnings. But this is just, we got to throw food in there at some point. It's a donut. Freezing drizzle is usually seen as the glazed donut because it's, again, freezing with a very shallow below freezing layer, cold layer closer to the surface so that it's freezing upon contact. So it's adding that glaze of ice to the surface. So you think of a glazed donut for freezing drizzle, and then there's sleet.
Which is just like the sprinkles.
Yes.
The sprinkles literally falling down. Not as impactful as freezing drizzle or that glaze of ice, but still can cause some impacts out there.
Especially if it's adding up and adding a layer on the road, it can still
Yes.
get slippery for sure, things like that. So now we're going to go on to talking about winter storm impacts and what you can help us
The viewers
out.
are the most important.
Yes, at home, there's things we look at. We want to hear from you on social media, whether that be Facebook or X. A lot of us have accounts, and we'd love for you to send in pictures. We're usually looking for totals, snow totals. So usually having a good yardstick handy is a good thing, because that's kind of your most reliable measurement to go out. And we usually say measure a few spots in the yard.
Because some
because
spots
there
are
could
more
be some-
shallow.
Yep.
Drifting of snow causes higher snowfall totals in some spots. And, we only have the airport and us at the station, and that's only 2 spots in town. That doesn't give us a
Not
range of, no, that is not representation of the city. So we want the southwest side of town, the northeast, northwest, and southeast, all the sides of town. And we want multiple measurements, and we want a bunch of them, so we can really start to total up those totals.
So if you're thinking about sending us in a report, we'd love to know how much you got, what location you are sending in your picture from, maybe the timing of it too, if it's continued to snow since your photo that you've taken and since your report. We'd like to know that. Photos are very helpful too. If you can take a picture of your yardstick in your yard, or tell us, how much you've averaged over the course of your yard. And then, again, any additional information, when it stopped, when it started snowing, is it still snowing, maybe road conditions in your neighborhood if you want to help us out. Of course, in the morning, we're getting you ready for the day and getting you started on the road. So things to think about when you're maybe, hopefully, sending us in a storm report or a snow report here. But we'll go into some of those cold weather impacts and what it can do to your body. Frostbite versus hypothermia. Frostbite, the lesser of the two evils, I want to say.
They're just so bad, each of them. It's really just, you don't want to mess with either of them.
No.
You could say, oh, I got this, but I didn't get this. It doesn't matter. They're both
Because it's
so bad.
preventable.
It is preventable. Understandable that extreme cold warnings, again, only in a matter of minutes that this can happen. And sometimes it's hard to have to leave my house. I have to go do something, which I always say not to. But yes, it's definitely preventable. You always want to just layer up. You have to protect every part of open skin, scarves and gloves and hats and winter jackets and layers. Of course, you need layers upon layers.
So comparing the two, frostbite, freezing of the skin and tissue, the symptoms are kind of the key difference between the two. You can experience numbness, a prickling kind of feeling in your extremities, I should say, red, white, or bluish, kind of your skin is changing colors.
Body wants to protect the internal organs. So, the tip of your nose, your ears, your fingertips, your toes, those are going to be the ones that, susceptible to the frostbite first.
So to ease yourself out of frostbite, if you suspect that your body may be going through that, all you have to do is gently warm the affected area.
Do not put your hand under hot water. It's
shock to the system,
but it is a shock to the system. That can damage it, actually.
So gently taking the time to ease your body into warmer conditions. And then we talk about hypothermia. That's when the body temperature is actually lowering too, and it's lowering below 95 degrees, and this can be deadly and life-threatening if you're suspecting some of these symptoms with hypothermia. Shivering, confusion, your mind is starting to get affected because of how cold it's been, and maybe you've been outside a little longer. This is longer exposure time usually.
It's almost like the same thing with heat exhaustion. Your body temperature is just higher than what it's supposed to be, and these are almost the same symptoms. Maybe not the shivering, but the confusion and the difficulty speaking and the sleepiness, those are some of the same symptoms. So it's just the opposite when we talk about in the winter.
So what you'll want to do is you want to move to a warm place, warm up, but also call 911, because this could be life-threatening. This is starting to impact your organs as your mind is being affected and other things. So that's kind of the difference we wanted to talk about between frostbite and hypothermia. And I just wanted to show you a quick graphic from the National Weather Service to talk about how you can layer up between versus it's chilly, it's cold, it's extreme cold. We love to throw those words around, but they each do have meanings. When it's chilly, it's not cold or extreme cold.
Right. And you could probably get away without some of these things in the chilly and cold that you couldn't get away with in the extreme cold.
Nebraskans are hardy.
Yes. Do you need the winter
hat? Especially the sandals.
Do you need the winter hat always?
Yeah.
Probably not. It's always good to maintain that body heat. I would say you don't really need a scarf when it's chilly. You do need it when it's the extreme cold, because then you want to protect every part of your face.
Especially the wind, too, is always an important...
Wind is such an important part.
Because, of course, that plays into the wind chill and what your body is feeling, because it's whisking away the heat that you'd normally have kind of pretty close to your body, but the wind's just kind of taking it away.
And some of these are just the the differences in layers. We all have a jacket, and then you have that heavy winter coat, or you all have gloves, and the gloves really determine the thickness of what you're wearing when it's chilly or when it's really cold outside. You don't need those really big, thick winter gloves when it's 40 to 50 degrees. But once you start talking about well below freezing, you're like, oh, I wish I layered up today.
Yeah, so some of the key differences there, and I know I've had to pull out some of my winter gear already. The ice scraper, I had to make sure that was in the car, things like that, which we'll get to an emergency car kit here in a second. But tips for staying warm with your pets, you got to think about them too. As Carmelo mentioned earlier, if they are cold, or if you're cold, they're cold too.
Yes, they got that layer of warmth on them, all the fur. But just because they have the fur,
doesn't mean
we don't
that
have the fur,
warm.
doesn't mean that they're warm,
Especially in these conditions that we're talking about.
You want to keep them safe.
So bring
we all
them
love
inside,
our pets.
yeah. If you do send them outside to go to the bathroom or whatever.
Keep an eye on them,
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
Like, oh, they could be out for a while.
Yeah,
Ooh,
no, bring them inside. So let's wrap things up here with talking about what can be good within your car during the winter season. Again, I just mentioned an ice scraper. A lot of people think credit cards are a good substitute.
Oh.
I don't know. I haven't
feel like
really
I'd have
tried
a hard time
that.
Doing that. You couldn't really reach out that far with it.
Yeah, and you
That's
couldn't
interesting.
cover a lot of surface. So someone
Yeah.
told me that, and I was like,
I guess
in a pinch,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
maybe. But a blanket, I even keep
Always.
this in my car just year round. But if you ever get pulled over and you're caught in a storm, your car can't run all that long, so something to keep insulated while you're sitting there on the side of the road. Tow straps. If you can't tow those, someone else could tow you. So that's just something to keep around. Jumper cables, water. A water bottle, you can actually fill an empty one with snow.
Yeah.
And it'll kind of warm within the heating of your car as you're going about.
I think the one people never think of is the kitty litter or the sand.
Yes.
And that's just great for traction underneath the wheel.
I didn't think about that until I became a meteorologist, really, within the last few years after college. And we're talking about these impacts and in constant communication with the National Weather Service, what's important. And learning that's very important for traction.
If you're going to say that, I'll never skid in my car, I'll never get stuck in the snow, you're just fooling yourself. You need the
or you're a driver,
measures.
you're a college driver that doesn't know Nebraska very well, and you haven't been here very long, because you'll find out pretty soon it doesn't take much to turn those roads pretty slick overnight. So warning triangles, I guess, are pretty good too. Non-perishable snacks. Candle, matches, coffee
backup
can.
phone battery. Oh my god.
Yeah,
That'd be great. Portable charger.
Stay warm close. But yes, the backup phone battery can be huge because your car's probably not running, or if you've been on the side of the road, you don't know how long
the car's gonna run.
Help. It may take. I was gonna say while we're talking about this, it's star 5. There's a.
I know what you're talking
Star
about.
Star 5 maybe. I think it's Nebraska State Patrol helpline. If you do get stuck, make sure that you have that ready to go, and they do wonders helping people out of these sticky situations. And we can see drifting snow, and it can just be really, really, really bad. But we've been talking about winter weather, and I wanted to pull up the 7-day forecast, really, Carmelo, to talk about.
We got some changes on
what
Monday.
is that, Saturday?
Well, you look at tomorrow afternoon, you're talking about 67, and then what's that Monday morning, Jessica? What low
is that
temperature
the teens?
is that?
Is that the coldest morning of the season I'm looking at?
I think smashing it by
yeah,
far.
smashing it. We've gotten in the 20s.
We've gotten
into
the 20s. I know we haven't gotten into the
not even the
teens.
lower 20s.
And I know Bill Rentschler had talked about it this morning. Our high temperature on Sunday, 36 degrees. First average high temperature below 40 degrees, I think, is like right around today. So we're pretty close to that.
Oh, okay.
So it's not crazy.
So get used to it, but we are going to drop from, casually 52
it's
to
just all
30.
over the place this week. But yeah, so that big thing, that 30% chance, it's going to be mainly rain in Lincoln on Saturday. And this is going to be Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening. But as our temperatures plummet behind a really powerful cold front, maybe our first powerful cold front of the year, it's going to change over to some snowflakes. So don't be surprised if you see some snow falling. I don't think we're going to get accumulation here. The ground is just still too much above freezing. Northeast Nebraska, trace to a half an inch. Wouldn't rule that out. But
dusting.
Here in Lincoln, dusting.
Those flakes are probably going to fly for, portions of eastern Nebraska this weekend.
But in terms of snow, I think we're pretty quiet overall next 7 days. I mean, we get right back into the 60s by the time we get to the middle of next week. So we're not done with the above average temperatures just yet, but we have a cold snap on the way this weekend and early next week.
Well, Carmelo, I really appreciate your time today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
This has been a segment for the Winter Weather Awareness Day that it is in Nebraska today. Of course, you can get updates on the forecast and any updates on winter storms as they come along on our 1011 Weather app. And of course, on the streaming studio, we'll be doing some more segments like this coming up. But we appreciate your time, and we hope everyone has a great rest of their Wednesday.